man.
It's hard to hold still with that music, with that beat dropping.
And we got Tobias in the house, right?
We got to. Well, we'll get to that.
I'm excited, Reggie. You understand?
First, we have to introduce ourselves.
Okay.
So, who am I? I'm Robert,
And I'm Reggie.
and this is Zone 3 Podcast. And
Yes.
who are we joined by?
Tobias
I
Gilk.
said boy. I'm nervous. Okay, we got a big name today. We got Toby.
MRI
Thank
Safety
you, Toby.
himself.
Yeah,
Man.
exactly.
Thank you, guys.
Who other than Toby Gilk to discuss MRI safety? And that's today's topic. So thank you for joining us, Toby.
And I feel like it's not just MRI safety, it's an evaluation of the 20 years that we've had, with MRI safety being as serious as it has been since, the death back in 2001, Michael Calabini, right?
Right, yeah.
So, this is
And
going to
we'll
be a good
definitely
episode,
touch up
guys.
on that. And actually, that's a kind of a big reason for today's episode because 2021 is what? Well, it's the 20-year anniversary of that incident. And we'll get into what happened and all that. And we'd love to hear your description of it.
Right. And we are doing a giveaway of a MRI safety notebook. Yes. So leave a comment. And let me just show you guys because I'm really happy with myself about how this turned out. So on the inside panel, there's actually parameter trade-offs. And on the
Cheat
back
sheet.
panel, there is the back panel has the trade-offs. And then you can see it on our website. I'll put a link in the description.
Who remembers DOS for Dummies? Who remembers that?
I do. Yeah, I still have
We
that.
got
actually.
MRI safety or MRI parameters. For
So,
dummies.
so all you have
Cheat
to
sheet.
do to qualify for the giveaway is just leave a comment. And just let us know how you feel about how things are going with safety.
Preferably a complimentary comment. But no, just kidding. We'll take any compliment.
Yeah.
Any comment. We'll take any compliment. We'll take any comment, whether it's a compliment or not. But all right.
And
So
let's
if
get
you
to the
would,
guest.
let's get to the man of the hour. This is Toby. If you would, Toby, if people don't already introduce yourself. Oh, no, you already introduce yourself if you
Sure.
would.
So, Tobias Gilk. I am an architect by training.
Batman by night.
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I've never seen the two of you in the same place.
There's a reason for that. Now, I became really interested in MRI safety, as we talked about on the prior episode when we were talking about facility design. I became interested in MRI safety through the zones and doors and access controls and the physical environment piece of it. And I thought I was hot stuff. I got invited to sit on the ACR's MRI safety committee, and I was, I'm the only architect on this group.
Right.
Bow down.
That's right. I walked into the room and, 95% of all the conversations just sailed right over my head. And that was a lousy feeling having gone in thinking that I was hot stuff. But the thing that it taught me, and this was back 2006 when I did this with the ACR, the thing that it taught me was you don't know MRI safety, Toby. You know bricks and mortar.
Right.
If you want to know MRI safety, you need to understand the physics and the clinical applications and the day-to-day operations, and
Kudos to you for taking on that task, because
at that point, I was all in.
Right.
I was committed that this was something that I was going to really do, and so that was just the next logical step for me.
Right.
And so I, from that point forward, I, said, okay, so the physical environment safety piece of it is important. I still believe that very strongly that's an important piece. But if you design the building to really kind of shape the activities inside the building, to shape patient care, then if you don't understand what the patient care objectives are, you're making pretty pictures,
Right.
Nothing wrong with pretty pictures, but I want to design pretty pictures that also, help patients get better scans and help facilities operate more effectively and more efficiently.
Right.
And out of that,
You saw this huge gap, huh?
well, and I wanted to knit the safety elements into those other concerns and considerations.
Right.
And so that's my origin story. That's how I came to be.
Well, and you were telling us in the last episode too, in like 1997, right? So there were pretty much no safety minimum safety guidelines, right?
None.
Back then, right?
Well, you used a good word there, origin. And I think what played a big part in the MRI safety origin of MRI safety would be what happened in 2001. So
Right.
we keep alluding to it, makes it more suspenseful, if you will, right? People are hanging on by the edge of their seats. But if you would just kind of dive into that, what happened in 2001 that's kind of led to us being more cognitive of.
Right. So I want to make sure that I'm clear that it's not like MRI safety began in 2001 when this accident happened. There were people, there have long been people who were concerned about it.
But there was just a leap forward in the progression of the understanding of safety, right?
How important it was.
So from the late 80s and through the 90s, you know, the MRI crowd was sort of, you know, weekend physicists, you know, the techs who had the slide rule or at least knew how to use one, you know, if they didn't have it in their pocket, because they had to, you know, they had to essentially, you know, kick the machine when it wasn't working right. And so it wasn't just your service engineer, you know, your tech really had to be all things to all people.
Right.
And so those early techs and early physicists were really, you know, Swiss Army knife. You know, they could do the clinical, they could do the technical, they could troubleshoot their system, they could do image quality stuff.
They had to tune the frequencies back then.
Exactly right.
Oh my God, that's crazy to me.
So safety absolutely was a part of their repertoire of knowledge and skills.
Right.
And I don't mean to take anything away from any of those people.
Right.
But the accident that you were tipping the hand of the story here in 2001 really sort of said, okay, this needs to be something we're all concerned about. This can't just be the Swiss Army knife, you know, super tech, you know, this can't live just within their domain. This needs to be something that radiology needs to be aware of, needs to be concerned about, needs to address. And the event itself, so this was 2001. Many of us, if we're asked to kind of identify what we know about this event, you know, young boy, oxygen tank, somebody brought it into the room when they shouldn't have, right? And that's pretty much all we know about it.
Right.
The actual story is much more complicated, much more involved, and has a whole lot more to teach us. So the boy, 6-year-old kid, Michael Colombini.
I have a 6-year-old, by the way.
So you can probably relate to the next part.
Yeah.
So it's summertime, and he wants to go play on the school playground. And so he's running around like a crazy 6-year-old kid does, and face plants on pavement.
Ooh.
And gets up and he's woozy dizzy. And his mom, who's with him, understandably freaks out, takes him to the hospital, takes him to the ED. They want to check for possible fracture, skull fracture, because he landed pretty hard. Right. And they do a CT, and they find an astrocytoma. Now, astrocytoma typically isn't found until a patient is symptomatic, and by the time you're symptomatic, it's too late to do anything, and it's a death sentence. And so late childhood, young adulthood is sort of when patients become symptomatic, and at that point, when they find it, you know.
So it was an incidental finding.
It was an incidental finding. This was like, you know, a bolt from heaven. You know, we're going to help you find this thing that had you not found, it would have killed your kid in 10, 15, 20 years. So they were at like sort of a smaller community hospital. They got transferred to the larger county hospital. They do pre-op MRI. They identify the extent of the tumor. A day or two later, he's whisked into the OR, do the operation, remove the brain tumor. They're very optimistic about this. Kid's doing well post-op, and they're going to get ready to discharge this kid. But they need a baseline because they're going to bring him back for imaging every 6 months for the next 5 years to make sure that they got the full margins of the tumor and there's not recurrence. And so before they discharge the kid, they're going to send him for one last MR. Now, you can imagine a 6-year-old kid who's just gone through brain surgery is probably not excited about anything else that has to happen in the hospital.
Right.
And so he's ticked off that he has to get this. So they told him, we're going to discharge you today. He wants to go home, and anything between now and going home is an unwelcome event.
Doesn't matter if you're 6 or 96. You want to go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So his dad is with him. His dad accompanies him down to the MRI addition to the hospital. And they drop dad in the waiting room, and they bring the kid back. There's a little induction area just right across the hall from the magnet room. And there's an anesthesiologist, and the techs who were working that day, never seen this anesthesiologist before, not exactly sure who he is, what he's doing, but I guess he's here. So he must, he must be authorized, must be okay. Right. So the anesthesiologist gives the kid a sedative.
What zone is this in?
In, I guess, what today we would call zone 3, but they didn't actually regulate it the way that we understand kind of zone 3 spaces today.
Right.
So they bring him into the magnet room, and they shift him over to the table, and he pushes through the sedative, and they give him a second dose. And they're positioning him on the
propofol. I don't know why I'm curious, but was it
I don't remember exactly what it is. I'd have to go back and look it up. But they get him positioned on the table, and it was one of the split head coils, and they're putting the top half of the head coil on the kid, doing a brain study for the baseline. And the kid sees this, the coil coming down at him, and the kid starts to push through the second dose of sedative, and so they give him a third dose of sedative. Now he's compliant. And they got the nasal cannula on him. They got the pulse oximeter on him. They got the top half of the head coil on him. The tech, who was helping with the positioning, leaves the anesthesiologist in the room and goes out and around back to the console. And this was 2001, and there was a lot of prep work. There was a lot of post-production work, from a study.
Right.
And so the tech is kind of getting everything geared up while the anesthesiologist is, doing finishing touches on making sure everything's fine. And the anesthesiologist sees the pulse oximeter go, 97, 96, 95, 94, 93. And he goes over to the wall outlet, the valve for the oxygen, and he starts adjusting it. And the little green floaty ball that tells you how many liters you're delivering in the little tapered glass thing on top of the valve, the little green floaty ball is sitting at the bottom of the glass, and he's turning the knob left and right, and there's nothing moving. And so he goes to at this installation, there wasn't an intercom or something like that. So he goes to the window, the observation window, bangs on it.
Help. Yeah.
Points to the door, and the tech comes and meets him at the doorway. And the anesthesiologist says, patient's desatting, the oxygen's not working. I need you to, you got to figure out what's going wrong. You got to fix the oxygen supply coming into the room. The anesthesiologist goes back to the boy, watching him desat, I don't know. And the tech who was about to do the scan, because there was so much sort of post-production work associated with scans at that time, you had to have two techs for a single magnet, because one of them was always doing post-production from, the study that was just completed. So tech number 1 goes to tech number 2, who had done the previous scan, and says, hey, I'm relatively new here. You've been here longer than I have. Anesthesiologist is complaining about the oxygen not working in the magnet room. I know there's something weird about the O2 system feeding the room. Can you fix it? And the more senior tech number 2, says, yeah, this is something you should probably know. So why don't I show you what's up with the oxygen system, and I'm going to take you and I'll teach you how to do this, and we can do it together.
All right.
So tech number 2 takes tech number 1 into the equipment room, the system component room for the MRI. And any of you who go into an equipment room today have no idea what an equipment room was like in the 80s, 90s,
Right.
early 2000s. Number one, they were enormous. Number two, you had what sounded like every fan ever created in God's green earth located in one room, and the noise level in those rooms when you walked in was really incredible. You couldn't hear a tornado, happening right outside the building, because it was so loud in there, and to keep it from annoying everybody everywhere else, those rooms were really well soundproofed. So the two of them go into the system component room, and they are acoustically isolated from the rest of the world.
Just to illustrate, paint the picture. So the anesthesiologist is left alone, unsupervised, with a 6-year-old patient in zone 4, while the two techs walk away.
Try to update the oxygen. Yeah. Okay.
Right. An anesthesiologist who, as far as the techs know, has never been to MRI before.
Right.
So the anesthesiologist continues watching the boy DSAT.
Right.
89, 88, 87.
Yeah.
And he is freaking out.
He's got to do something. Right?
And he doesn't know that the techs have gone into essentially, sound isolation chamber, and he keeps on yelling out to them, hey, what are you guys doing with the oxygen? I need the oxygen for this kid.
Right.
At the same time as the techs go into the system component room to try and restore the oxygen, instead of being like most hospitals where everything comes through a piped in central supply, they actually had a bulk storage tank that lived in the equipment room. And then they just poked the pipe through the wall to the outlet that was there. Well, if that tank in the equipment room runs dry, you got to disconnect it and the valve and the regulator, and you got to move it out of the way, and you got to roll the other giant tank in. You got to reconnect the valve and the regulator and rehook everything up and turn it back on. And it's an ordeal, right?
It's not a quick fix, right?
No. So the two techs are in there doing that. Not only doing it, but, doing sort of a how-to instructional process of doing it. And the anesthesiologist is losing his cool.
Right.
Understandably. In this same moment, a nurse who had accompanied an earlier patient down, and she had left something, she left a chart or God knows what, but she had left something. She comes back to the department to retrieve whatever it was that she left, lets herself into what we today would call the zone 3 space, where this prep induction area was. Right. And she hears the anesthesiologist losing his stuff, inside the magnet room.
Nobody's around.
And she's looking around, there's nobody there. And the anesthesiologist is saying, my patient's desatting, I need oxygen, I need it now.
Right.
And the nurse thinks to herself, well, wait a second, when I was down here earlier today, I remember seeing some oxygen cylinders. If the anesthesiologist needs oxygen,
I know where to get them, right?
I know where to get it.
Right.
And so she goes and she picks up an oxygen cylinder, and she calls out to the anesthesiologist, hey, doc, if you need oxygen, I've got some. Here it is. And she and the doc meet at the doorway, and she hands the oxygen cylinder to the doc. He turns around, takes 2 steps into the room, and the magnet grabs it out of his arms.
Was it a 1.5 or 3?
It was a 1.5. And the oxygen tank flies in,
Missile
busts
effect,
the head coil, hits this kid who just a day or two before had a craniotomy, right? Yeah. To remove a brain tumor. And the oxygen tank hits him in the face and in the head. And it, oscillates back and forth before it comes to rest. Right. So it smacks him more than once. And so now...
And the techs are nowhere...
Still not back yet. Right?
No, they're still trying to fix the oxygen. Right. So the nurse or the anesthesiologist calls the code team. The code team rushes in. And the code team freaks the hell out.
Yeah. So the code team's rushing into zone 4.
Zone 4. What we consider zone 4 at least.
Right. Code team, the boy is wedged in there with the oxygen cylinder. And
nobody's quenched it.
They're like,
What do we
you
do?
know, we don't know how to extract a patient safely. So there was a paramedic ambulance crew in the ED. They had dropped off a patient. So the code team gets the paramedic crew from the ED, brings them in, and they, with the code team, sort of do an extrication and pull the boy out of the magnet and get him out and are, you know, taking him out of the MRI department. And in this moment, the two techs come out of the equipment room and go, "Hey guys, we fixed the oxygen."
Oh, that's tough.
And they see them wheeling the bloody boy, you know, out of the magnet room.
Man, my heart goes out to those parents.
Yeah, to everybody involved, really.
I have lots of questions. Where do I start? I don't know. That's just really upsetting. It's like really I got a 6-year-old.
But I can easily imagine how that could happen without some of the things that we have in place now.
Sounds like a lot of things went wrong.
Well, and I'm going to challenge you on that a little
Lack
bit.
of educated personnel would be a big part of that.
Right.
So to me, there are two sort of central takeaways from this story.
Right.
One of them is that every bad step that was taken in this event was somebody who thought that they were helping.
Right.
Somebody who thought that they were doing the right thing
exactly.
in that situation.
Right.
They just didn't have sort of the big picture appreciation of how things change in the MRI environment and how what might be appropriate somewhere else inside the hospital is the absolute last thing you want to do in this part of the hospital.
For sure.
So
Was there any disciplinary action against those techs? Was there anything against the license?
I don't believe so. I mean,
They're trying to do what's right. They were just trying to fix the oxygen.
They walked away from Zone 4 and left it unsupervised.
So the operational structure of this MRI service was a mess.
Right.
So one of the best things that came out of it, other than kind of the downstream stuff with the ACR and that kind of thing,
Right.
the guy who was the CEO of the hospital, he probably lost his job because of this, but he came out and he said, "This is our hospital. This was our patient. This is our responsibility."
Right.
He said that from the beginning. There was no sort of
awesome.
legal hedging of, well, accidents happen and yada. He came out from the very beginning and said, "We're responsible for the safe care of this patient, and therefore we are responsible for the accident that happened."
Morally, I think is the best way of it.
Right.
So I think it took a lot of moral courage to do
This
that.
was in I believe in one of the New England states, right?
Right. Yeah. So it was Westchester County, New York, which is a fairly affluent sort of bedroom community outside of New York City.
Right.
Man, that's a tough one. But I guess glass half full from this, a lot of safety
Eye-opening.
policies implemented.
So that hits on the second sort of major takeaway from this is this accident directly precipitated the ACR white paper that became the guidance document that became the manual. And so, yes, this document did create the single best body of best practices relative to MRI safety. The thing that I find frustrating is that if we pick apart sort of the specific contributing elements to the Colombini accident, right. So what the anesthesiologist didn't have any MRI safety training as far as the techs knew, and there was no sort of structure for identifying that person. Right. Today, you look at any of the accreditation organizations, the minimum MRI safety training required for an anesthesiologist who's providing patient care in the MRI environment, 0. You don't need it for Joint Commission. You don't need it for ACR accreditation. You don't need it for any of the accreditation organizations, right?
Right.
So the techs and situational awareness. Now, they had 2 techs. At that point in time, just from a workflow standpoint, you had to have 2 techs per magnet to do that.
Right.
But now everybody's up in arms because the ACR manual recommends +1 staffing, that however many magnets you have sharing a shared zone 3, that you have at least 1 additional person beyond the techs who are driving those magnets. And there are sites who are, losing their stuff because, we need to hire another person. Do you know how much that's going to cost?
Right.
So from a staffing standpoint, we've kind of given up on the idea that we're going to have redundancy as a minimum requirement. It's a recommendation, but even that recommendation is looser than the situation that they had, at that site at that time. So nobody requires it. Not a single accrediting or licensing organization requires that you have any kind of staffing redundancy.
Right.
So that piece isn't there. Zones. The nurse had sort of free access into, zone 3. Joint Commission in their diagnostic imaging standards kind of describes, I think they go to great lengths to describe the zones without ever saying zones or without ever sort of paying homage to the ACR.
Right.
So Joint Commission actually does kind of have zone language in their standards. But I've gone to all kinds of MRI facilities, older MRI facilities where the entrance to the magnet room is off of the shared radiology corridor. You're going down the corridor, you take the first door on your right, you're in the control room. You continue down the corridor, you take the second door on your right, you're in the magnet room. You take the third door on your right, you're in the equipment room. Right. If you take the doors on your left, you're in CT or fluoro or something else, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody who's going to any radiology procedure is walking right past the MRI room. And if you get confused about was it second door on the left or second door on the right,
You're opening up doors.
And you're opening it up and walking in.
Yeah.
I have never, ever heard of a facility essentially getting dinged by the Joint Commission, even though they have zone language in their standards, saying this is an unacceptable condition.
Right.
So if we look at the flip side of the Colombini accident, it absolutely did generate sort of the best body of best practices that we have ever had in MR in the ACR various iterations of that document. And yet we could replicate that accident again today pretty easily at a site that chose to only do the minimum required for licensure or accreditation, because the minimum expectations in MRI are still far lower than would prevent that accident from happening again today.
Right. Wow. It's kind of scary thinking about that, right?
Which is actually kind of really touched on the importance of having somebody who is dedicated staff technologist for safety. And that's where MRSOs, MRSEs kind of come into play. And I'm actually curious if, before we get into what those are, let's first talk about what's the difference between the two. Because I'm curious, what is the difference?
So an MRSO, let me analogize. So nobody would have a nuke med program, a hot lab, or, fluoro. You can't have those programs and not have a radiation safety officer.
Right.
Why? Well, because radiation is harmful, right? And if people are inadvertently exposed to radiation, that would be bad. And so we want to make sure, both from an employee safety standpoint and general population and patient safety standpoint, that we manage this sort of in the air physical environment risk effectively. And so we're going to put a person in charge. We're going to call them the radiation safety officer, and that person is going to be answerable for the facility's performance in, are we checking our aprons? Right. Are we checking dosimetry badges? Is the collimation correct on, the devices? And where are we scattering? And is the shielding correct? So we have all of these kind of formal responsibilities and procedures that we put on this person that we call, the RSO, the Radiation Safety Officer.
Now, to give perspective, all that didn't just automatically happen with radiation either, too. So there was incidents that had to happen with that, right? Like just, radiation and just the, they could tell that radiation exposure caused harmful events, right?
Right. And a lot of that structure and a lot of the regulatory stuff for ionizing radiation really came out of the Manhattan Project. This was government regulation to protect government employees and government contractors for, we don't want people working for us to get exposed to this. And so a lot of sort of the basic structure of ionizing radiation safety came out of the nuclear weapons program, World War II. And so when we started having x-rays and we were like, oh, wait a minute, x-rays, can cause cancer. We're like, oh, hey, wait a minute. We've got all of this body of standards and, government regulations. Yeah. Right. We're just going to bring that over and we're going to use that as sort of healthcare regulations for ionizing radiation exposure.
Kind of modern day version of copy paste, right?
Exactly. Right. Why reinvent the wheel?
Right.
And it has done really well in terms of protecting patients.
Right.
Now, so that's the ionizing side. The MRI side, it's almost like, MRI doesn't use ionizing radiation, therefore it must be safe because it's the radiation that's the unsafe thing. You know, that's like saying, people die in car crashes, so therefore jumping out of an airplane with a parachute must be safe because you're not going to die in a car crash if you jump out of a plane with a parachute. And nobody stopped to think,
so true.
Maybe jumping out of an airplane with a parachute has a different set of risks that we need to manage in a different way.
Right.
And that from like a regulatory standpoint has never happened for MRI. Right. I think it's only 6 of the 50 U.S. states have minimum requirements for MR techs.
Oh.
And those that have minimum requirements, generally it's an RTR. And so we're going to require that you go and you get trained in ionizing radiation in order to administer, if we require anything at all from a state licensing standpoint, we're going to require that you get trained in ionizing radiation to, run an MR. Who comes up with this? I mean, what sense does this make?
Right.
I was talking with a tech in Massachusetts who got he's an MR tech. He's an RTR, but he practices MR. And he got his CE credits in MR. Mm-hmm. State won't count them.
Oh, wow.
You're an RTR. You need to have ionizing radiation CE credits. But I scan on an MR scanner. The CE credits, these MRI Safety CE credits that I got, are more relevant to the health and safety of my patients. Well, they don't count because you're an RTR, so you need to have, ionizing radiation CEs. So the whole thing on the MRI side from a regulatory oversight standpoint is so incredibly messed up.
It's
so
mark, right?
Yeah. So we've missed so many opportunities to kind of put structures in place that help protect patients, help protect caregivers. So the idea of the MRSO, and I know this is a long sort of rambling lead up to answering your question.
No, we love it.
The idea of the MRSO is, okay, we're going to name individuals, right? Just like we do on the RSO side.
Right.
We may not have the whole body of kind of regulatory structure that goes along with the RSO side, but at the very least, we're going to say, you, Reggie, you are the person, that we're going to turn to if we have questions or problems or congratulations or whatever on MRI safety. You, Reggie, you are now the guy, right? Well, now all of a sudden, now there's somebody who has responsibility, who has authority, who can say, wait a minute, I have to answer for this?
Right.
We're changing this. We are not doing things the way that we've been doing it.
Right about
right?
That. Yep. Absolutely.
I got to answer for this.
You got to answer for it. Yep.
Right. So one of the and it was developed with the best of all possible intentions, but it's just gone horribly wrong. The idea that MRI safety is everybody's responsibility. All of my techs, all of the radiologists, they take MRI safety really seriously.
Right.
Okay, great. So when there's a problem, whose door do I knock on? Now all of a sudden it's no longer everybody's responsibility. Now it's somebody else's.
Right.
Oh, there's a problem.
Oh.
Well,
I wouldn't even hear that day.
That part's not my responsibility, right?
Well, responsibility is like a beach ball. You can wash your hands clean, just pass it to somebody else.
Right.
And that's typically, in my experience, what happens. We have MRSOs at our facility.
Oh, yes.
And they take on the responsibility of the preemptive research. But once that patient shows up and you're the scanning tech, it's on you as far as making sure that they're compatible.
Properly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting too how you say that you got to pinpoint that person, because I literally just had to renew my CPR license, and they were just talking about if you don't say, hey, you go get the defibrillator, then if you're just like, hey, someone give me a defibrillator, everyone's kind of looking at each other like, who's going to get the defibrillator, right? But if you say, hey, you right there, go get the defibrillator, then that person knows like, oh, okay, I need to, go get the defibrillator type of thing. So
there's a tactic with my kids.
There's this story that I remember, and clearly it sort of burned itself into my memory from like a high school or college psychology class. A story of this young woman, Kitty Genovese. And so this was, I don't know, I want to say 30s, 40s, 1930s, 1940s, New York. She was a single woman who lived in this big apartment complex, sort of a U-shaped apartment complex. Half of all the units look into the middle of the U, and half of the apartments look out, out everywhere else. Big multi-story building, and dozens, if not hundreds, of units that kind of looked into the central entry courtyard where this was. So she was a nurse, I think. Anyway, she had worked a late shift or whatever, and she coming home in the middle of the night or late in the evening anyway. And so she's in that central courtyard, walking into her apartment building, and she gets attacked. She gets mugged in, sort of that entry courtyard.
Right.
She gets beaten and killed. And police are looking around going, nobody called the police. They show up afterwards, but nobody called saying,
that scream.
It's like stadium seating, basically.
So these psychologists go and they do interviews with everybody who lives in the apartment building. And it's like, were you here when that happened? Were you aware that it was happening? What they find out was that there were a dozen or more residents or families who heard her screaming, saw it happening, went to the window so that they could watch to see when the police arrived, but not one of them called, because the thinking was, well, there's so many units that look into this central courtyard that surely somebody else called.
Yeah.
So this notion that, everybody's responsible, it diffuses the sense of personal ownership, personal responsibility so much that we may think that it's helping, but that sense of it's everybody's responsibility, we all take a role in this, may have the exact opposite effect of what you think. It may in fact make it harder for people to to act in the way that you want them to.
For sure.
And you explain it that way, for sure.
That makes total sense. Yeah, man.
So the MRSO is the the analog to the RSO, specific to MRI. It most often is sort of a senior MR tech, somebody who's played the game for a while and has a good idea of what happens in sort of the practical world of patient care.
Right.
And at the same time has the technical understanding of, well, if we need to drop this pulse sequence from 2 watts per kilogram to 0.5, how do I do that? What challenges are inherent in that? or what difference does it make if I use the body coil for transmitter, if I'm using a local TR coil, for knee or head or whatever, and how does that impact the safety of this implant or device or foreign body and that kind of thing. So you want somebody who kind of has that both technical and practical, experience in terms of patient care and kind of bringing it together. The other two MR safety roles are the MRMD, the MR medical director. And the idea behind that is, so you've got a radiology group, right?
Right.
And you've got the, probably somebody or a couple somebodies who are, particularly good at breast. And so they're doing breast MR and they're doing mammos and, you got the ortho specialists and you got people who are body part or disease progress specialists.
Right.
But you don't necessarily have modality specialists. Radiologists aren't trained in a modality. They're trained in anatomy and pathology. Right. The good ones pick up the modality along the way, but that's not something that's part of their formal training.
Right.
And so you have a radiology group that's got 12, 20 radiologists. Do you know if any of them really, get MR?
I've had several conversations where you call the rad and you get approval on an implant of some sort, and they say, "I don't know. What do you think?"
And there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with the radiologist recognizing sort of the limits of their knowledge and turning to the techs who in a lot of ways are going to have more specific knowledge about implants and devices and scan parameters and what it means for this patient as opposed to that patient. And
those are the smart radiologists.
Those are the smart radiologists. But within, a practice group, within a radiology group, there has to be at least one, radiologist who, may not be the person who's on call, overnight on Sunday night,
right.
But there has to be somebody within that practice group who says, I'm going to set the direction for this group in terms of MRI practice and MRI safety. And that person, the MRMD, maybe it's the head of the group, maybe it's just sort of a designated MR head of the group, kind of thing. And that person really needs to say, okay, within the practice, this is where we're strong, this is where we're weak. These are the individuals who, from an MR standpoint, are strong. These are the individuals from an MR standpoint who are weak. We need to kind of elevate the skills, the knowledge of the weaker ones. We need to develop tools that essentially mean that we're delivering consistent, decision-making, consistent patient care.
And logical decisions, right?
Exactly. So I go to sites and I do facility evaluations. And the very first thing that I like to do before I start spouting off and giving suggestions is I like to go and I observe. Right. And I started doing this thing just a couple of years ago, and I kicked myself for not doing it before. But if I'm visiting a facility for, a week, a Monday through Friday or whatever, I want to show up on Saturday or Sunday, and I want to watch the overnight weekends. Because those people never get
different set of rules.
Exactly. So I'm
it's like substitute teacher.
Exactly.
So it's 3 a.m. On a Sunday morning or something like that, and I'm sitting with this tech observing, sort of the overnight. And this is a big hospital, and they're doing their inpatients on the overnight hours and that kind of thing. And this tech says something to me, and it strikes me funny, and so I ask these follow-up questions, and the tech essentially says to me, we're not really busy tonight, but some nights it's just kind of crazy. And if you need a meal break and it doesn't look like you're going to get one based on the list that they give you or whatever, the rads who work the overnights on the weekend shifts are usually the greenest, the lowest on the totem pole.
Right.
And I found that I can get a meal break if I just pick up the phone. I look at somebody who's on my list who's got an implant or device that's not really well documented, and I'll pick up the phone. And even if I'm perfectly comfortable with it, I'll ask the rad, Mrs. Smith, who's coming up next, has got this implant, and I'm not real comfortable with it. I need you to clear it, or for me to scan her.
Right.
And then the rad would be like, oh, let's push Mrs. Smith to tomorrow morning, and we'll let the daytime rads clear that.
Clever.
Great. Now I got a 45-minute meal break.
Yep.
And the fact that there is that kind of inconsistency, in terms of
predictable inconsistency.
Yeah. And, and it's like, okay, that practice group needs to recognize that, that they're delivering inconsistent patient care. They're not following sort of a logical set of clinical decision-making steps, for delivering care. And they need an MRMD to essentially kind of step up and say, this is the structure we're going to use for making decisions. This is what the expectations, if you're reading MR, these are the expectations in terms of, knowledge and skills and comfort level with that. Right. And if you're not there now, we need to identify a way to kind of build your knowledge, your skills, your competencies to get you where you need to be.
Right.
So the MRMD needs to do that on kind of the clinical decision-making side. And then the third role is an MRSE, MR Safety Expert. And this is really sort of designed around a medical physicist, but it doesn't have to be a physicist. And in fact, what I'll call super techs. So, the Swiss Army knife, technologist who has an understanding of the physics, who has an understanding of, patient care and, patient compliance or non-compliance,
Right.
who has experience with implants and devices, who knows how to modify a pulse sequence if you're concerned about, time varying gradient and neuromuscular stimulation or radiofrequency heating or, how are we going to make these trade-offs from a risk benefit? So the MRSE is really a consultative role for either or both the MRSO or the MRMD. I got in, over my head or to an area where I'm just not terribly comfortable, that I understand the physics correctly, or I understand how best to manipulate the study that we're going to do to get the SAR down to where it needs to be or whatnot. Right. Or why, when I'm doing two patients back to back, one of whom, is 150 kilograms and the next one is 15 kilograms, why do I have the same SAR value when my B1 RMS is completely different for this?
Right.
They're both supposed to be measures of RF energy.
Right.
So why is one of them exactly the same and one of them totally different?
Right.
So the MRSE is the phone a friend, really. You have a question about patient care, about patient clearance. You don't understand how the peculiarities of your MR system or the physics behind it or whatnot. You call that person up and, hey, help me understand why is doing this and how do I evaluate this patient as opposed to that patient when these numbers are the same and these other numbers are completely different and I thought everything's measuring the same.
Is it like pretty much like an Amazon Alexa?
Yeah.
Can I scan this? That's funny. That's awesome.
Well, I imagine you see a lot of different incidents happen with your role with the MRI safety page. What would you say is the region or country that you see the most safety incidents, and what do you attribute that to?
Well, there's radically different levels of transparency and radically different levels of sort of oversight and professionalism in different countries. So
budgets, right?
It's hard to make some direct comparisons. I for example, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, U.S. is better or worse than India or China or...
I mostly just want you to talk crap on Canada right now.
Oh, the Canadians, they're the worst.
We love you, Canada.
Just kidding, I love Canada.
I think that there are some baseline conditions that create less safe practices. So...
Right.
Do you find that Europe is more safety conscious than U.S. or equally, or?
I find that there are different motivations. I think U.S. and Europe seem to be kind of on fairly similar sort of levels, but the motivation for how they got there is very different in my estimation. Europe tends to be more kind of regulatory and oversight oriented. The U.S. tends to be more litigation oriented.
Right.
So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, that there aren't regulatory or accreditation standards that would prevent the Columbini accident from happening again. But we have made some really significant changes in practice because everybody's afraid of getting their butt sued off.
Right.
That's a potent motivation. It's not the most sort of reasoned motivation because we do lots of things because we're afraid of getting sued that probably, if we thought about it from a risk management standpoint, nobody's going to sue me over this, or the relative risks of doing the thing that people are so freaked out about is so small, and yet, I got no problem doing triple dose runoffs, and I don't give that a second thought, but I'm not going to scan this patient with a BB in their calf, because they're going to sue me and I'm going to lose my tech license. No. Patient's going to be fine. Nobody's going to sue you. You're not going to lose your license. You're paying attention to the wrong thing. And that's not any individual's fault. It's because we don't teach MRI risk. We don't teach risk management. We don't teach it to techs. We don't teach it to radiologists. We don't teach it to the medical physicists in the U.S. Europe does a much better job of teaching their medical physicists about MRI safety than we do. And one of the things that I think is one of the most pervasive kind of urban myths within MRI is this idea that, well, if we're going to be safer, we're going to be slower. It's going to drag the whole process. And I can, as well as anybody, I can come up with, quote unquote process improvements. We're going to add this thing. We're not going to think about how it actually integrates with process and workflow, earlier conversation. We're just going to take this thing. We're going to add this, we're going to do point of care, EGFR testing, but we're not going to put it anywhere in the process where you would want to make that decision about, are we going to give this patient, contrast or not? We're going to put it someplace where that decision's already been made, or we're going to put it someplace, so far upstream that half the time that information gets lost and go ahead and give them, contrast. I'm sure that test result was fine. So we're not thinking about that. And so a lot of these things that we're adding, my zone sign diatribe, we're telling people you got to put zone signs up. But we don't tell them why. We don't tell them what it's supposed to accomplish. It's a checkbox, and everybody's going to get focused on this checkbox, and we're going to ignore, the bigger things. The greatest, sort of most direct example of this. So I was at a facility, this was a number of years ago, right after Joint Commission survey had gone through. And walked into sort of the MRI, and they had a kind of a hallway that fed into the control room, and that hallway wound up just collecting all the stuff that got brought to MRR that never leaves, So there were wheelchairs from the floors and portable gas tanks and stuff like that. And they weren't right next to the console or the magnet room door, but there was, a bunch of stuff. Back behind, the IV poles and all of the stuff that just kind of got collected there was a fire extinguisher cabinet. And so when we went through, and I was talking with the techs there, and I said, so when Joint Commission came through, I've been hearing a lot about them just getting totally worked up about checking fire extinguishers. Did they check your fire extinguisher? Oh yeah, they made beeline right for it. And I look over at where the fire extinguisher is, and there are like 2 IV poles and a wheelchair and a portable gas cylinder sitting in front of the fire extinguisher cabinet. the surveyor would have had to have like climbed over all this other crap, you know, to check the fire extinguisher. And I asked, I was like, did they say anything about the stuff that you're storing here, the wheelchairs from IV poles from the floors or whatnot? No, they looked at the fire extinguisher, they checked their box, they turned around, they walked out. I'm like, to the best of my knowledge, and I spend a lot of time looking at MRI accidents and adverse event reports, I have never seen a patient or a staff, caregiver, visitor ever harmed in MR from a portable fire extinguisher. I got pictures like you wouldn't believe of wheelchairs and IV poles and medication pumps.
The
and
irony there, right?
You know,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know, it's a forest for the trees kind of thing. You're missing the reason that people get injured in MR because you got a checkbox that says
The
fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff just makes me nuts because you're there.
Lacks critical thinking skills.
Yeah. You're checking on things, but you have
defeats the
no
purpose of that
idea
checkbox,
what
it does,
the relative risks are or what it is that you know, if you checked would actually diminish the, you know, the risks to patients and to caregivers.
Right.
I mean, techs get hurt a lot in MR.
For sure.
Who cares about them, right?
Yeah.
When I was actually learning MR back in 2009, I was doing my clinical training, and one of our technologists told me a story. It freaked me out. He told me a story about an IV pole that actually got pulled into the room, and he put his hand out to try to stop it, just out of reflex, and it pinned his hand up against the magnet. And he's like, you know, pinned up, and he's telling everyone to quench the magnet, and nobody wants, you know, everybody's like, oh, no, I'm not quenching the magnet. It's like the last thing they want to do, right?
Lunchtime.
And long story short, you know, they ended up being able to pry his hand off, but he had a glove on. It was very difficult. He showed me the x-rays. Oh my gosh. It was, you couldn't tell it was a hand. So I was surprised his hand actually was still functional after seeing that. But you're so right about that. When it becomes just a checkbox, it's detrimental. It is detrimental to what they're really there for, right?
So I think that's one of the challenges is we have this pretty big disconnect between accreditation and regulation, you know, the oversight for MRI safety and the body of best practices. I mean, the body of best practices is really spectacular. I mean, there's, setting aside whatever small contributions I may have made, you know, the body of work that is now the ACR manual on MR safety is remarkable. You know, it was reviewed and incorporated in the UK's MHRA MRI safety document. Mm-hmm. It's referenced in a number of different European national standards in terms of MRI safety or aspirational bits on MRI safety. The Australian New Zealand Royal College of Radiology copied and pasted big chunks of the ACR, you know, document into their MRI safety guidance. It has become de facto the worldwide standard for MRI safety.
Like an atlas, huh?
So we've got this incredible tool on one hand, and we've got effectively nothing, you know, in terms of regulation and accreditation. Right. And so facilities really kind of get a pick where on that spectrum they want to live. You know,
right.
The people who, you know, I'm going to do whatever the minimums I need for, you know, state licensure and for accreditation can do
they want that
very little.
ACR accredited put up on the wall, right?
There was a period, so if you get ACR accreditation, you know, they hand you a press kit, you know, so you can send to the local paper, local TV stations or whatever, you know, Bob's House of Imaging now, you know.
Certificate, yeah.
Right. But the PR statement says, you know, about their MR accreditation, the pre-formatted PR public press release thing says, you know, ACR as a demonstration of the highest level of quality and safety, you know. The thing that I find so strange is that the ACR does have the highest level of quality in that guidance document. But you look what of that guidance document is actually a part of their MR accreditation program.
Right.
And man, you need a magnifying glass to try and find correlating bits. Because it's not there.
Well, I know you said too that you look up, like, so what are you using to look up these adverse events, and where do people go to report events? Because I feel like, if something happened, there's a person now that's designated to report those events, because I work at a place that, has those positions in place. But if I didn't and something happened, like, what am I supposed to, like, how do I, approach that?
Right.
Is that like...
So depending on where you live, you may have state requirements. So state of Pennsylvania requires adverse event and near miss reporting in hospitals, but not in outpatient imaging centers. So we're getting about half of the MRI adverse events if they happen equally at hospitals and outpatient imaging centers, because about half of MR is done on an outpatient basis, or at IDTF type of facilities.
Right.
So if you're in Pennsylvania, you have to report to Pennsylvania. Minnesota has some sort of state reporting system as well.
But nothing's mandated to report? It's all to the state level?
The honor system kind of.
So
the data can be kind of skewed then.
The data is terribly messy. Very few states have requisite reporting systems. Those that do, very few of them actually share out their data or make it public. Pennsylvania is the only state that I'm aware of that every so often, every 3 to 5 years, they write up a paper that says, hey, we did an analysis of some of our MRI reported adverse events, and here's what we found.
Right. You don't think that has anything to do with Dr. Canal being there in Pennsylvania, do you?
I don't know. I don't know if that's just coincidence.
He said at the city council, he's like, we're going to make this.
Well, I don't know.
I know, right?
So there are a small number of states that actually have mandatory reporting requirements. Everybody is supposed to report adverse events to the feds, to the FDA.
Oh, yeah, MOD.
Right. So the MOD database. MOD is just the name of the interface that we see, the database search tool. The program is called MedWatch. So if you just Google MedWatch, adverse event reporting or whatever, it'll take you to the website that says, oh, so you want to report, are you reporting as a patient or as a care provider? It gives you different options depending on that. But there are 3 criteria for reporting to MedWatch. If you kill somebody with a drug or medical device, you have to report it to MedWatch. If the person dies, the reporting requirement is twofold. It's both the site and the manufacturer of the device involved both have to report directly to the FDA. That's really the only unambiguous criteria for reporting. The other 2 start to get murkier. So the next criteria is serious injury. And I have 2 separate times I've asked the FDA what serious injury means.
Seems subjective.
Acoustic is serious to me.
So the first response I got back was, when I asked the question to the FDA, was, well, we're not clinicians. We don't make determinations as to what is serious or not. So the site that injures the patient gets to make the determination whether it's serious enough to qualify for reporting or not. That seems like, the fox guarding the hen house.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm playing poker with a full house every time.
The second time I asked, they said it's hospital admission is their benchmark for what constitutes serious. And I'm like, so a broken bone where you go to the ED and you get a cast, or, multiple lacerations and you need stitches and you lost a lot of blood, but they're going to give you, an IV for a couple hours before they send you home.
Or RF burn.
Right. None of those are serious because we didn't admit the patient to the hospital, and therefore they're not.
Right.
They don't flip into the mandatory reporting. And once you get below you've killed somebody, you get into injury situations, the reporting requirement is on the device manufacturer.
Oh.
So what that means is that the hospital or the imaging center essentially needs to say, this is real enough and we want it reported, and we're going to pass this information along to the MR system manufacturer.
Right.
And they will report it. The third one is unreasonable risk of either death or serious injury.
Okay.
So if we have a hard time defining what serious injury is, unreasonable risk of serious injury seems to be, sort of extra vague and foggy. And in my opinion, the way that should be interpreted is if something goes flying at the magnet, if there had been somebody standing between that object and the magnet when it went flying,
right.
Was there a risk of them being seriously injured as a result of that? Were they injured and yet there was a risk of a more serious injury if it had flown a different way or they'd been in a slightly different position?
Right.
Now, in my mind, that's unreasonable risk. Was the patient burned,
Right.
And, that, in my mind, is an unreasonable risk.
Right.
And so those kinds of things I would like to see reported with much more frequency.
Just based on your position within MRI, I imagine you hear about a lot of different safety events. And I'm curious, I'm guessing that at this point you've heard them, you've seen them all, but is there any that still surprised you? What was probably the most recent one that surprised you?
Well, just a couple of days ago, there was a wheelchair that went into the magnet in Ukraine that got picked up by a local TV station in Ukrainian, or local newspaper in Ukrainian that, I saw somebody posted something about it on Twitter and went to the website and did a Google Translate and, figured out what was going on. I hear of all kinds of things that, people will send me a private message of, this just happened at a facility I happen to be familiar with that wasn't mine,
A friend I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, feel free to do those requests.
Hypothetically, I know this guy who,
Well, can we go ahead and give everyone your number?
If you want to reach out to me through the MRI Safety Group page on Facebook.
Yes.
And
Has that been a challenge? Because there's a lot of, what's some of the challenges you had with, being the face of that group? And I guess, what is the term? What is the...
I feel like it has to be challenging because of how fast things move in MRI.
Admin is the word.
And just how you have to stay up on the education. Just because you got trained 10 years ago on what was happening doesn't mean that right now, you still kind of know what the right things are to do. So that really has to be challenging to be in such a position.
Well, one of the things that I love so much about the Facebook safety group page is, so just like there are all these facilities and they get to choose where they want to be on this continuum of, lowest common denominator to best practices, the same thing is true with techs.
Right.
To a degree,
For sure.
And I think many techs, especially if they're in smaller facilities or they don't have that much kind of professional connection with other techs in other cities and other magnets and, other sites, they may think that, the way it was when I was, taught a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago is the way it is.
Right.
And the thing that I really love about the group is essentially sort of saying, no, there's a big wide world, and there are people who have, sort of specialty interests or skill sets, or, they're pushing the role of the MR technologist into places that maybe make you nervous or uncomfortable. And, but there are techs, there are rads, there are medical physicists, there are admins, there are product and service vendors who continue to kind of push the envelope, and each in their own little way. So the idea that I'm bringing people from, a small community hospital in, rural Arkansas or whatever into the group, and letting them see, hey, wait a minute, you want to be the guy or woman who is like the person for cardiac or DTI, or maybe it's not even something clinical. Maybe it's something technical. Maybe you want to get into, developing pulse sequences, and you've got an idea for, the next metal suppression pulse sequence that's just going to kick everything else's butt,
Right.
The idea that, who you are or were the day before you join, is who you have to be as a tech, as a rad, as a physicist for the rest of your career. I love the idea that people come into that group and, go, oh my God, I had no idea.
Right.
I had no idea that a guy who was trained as an architect,
right.
Has
such a passion for the field, right?
Right.
I did want to ask you though, like if you had a time machine and you had to do it over again, would you choose the same route through architecture, or would you choose a different route?
Oh man. Part of me is just, I'm so grateful for kind of the serendipitous opportunities that kind of fell in front of me as I was moving through. And some of that is just dumb, stupid luck. Some of it is amazing people who kind of, helped me take the next step or the next 5 steps. In some ways, I feel like I'd be disrespecting, fate and a lot of people who helped me if I said, oh no, I'd redo it and I'd change a whole bunch of things. What's the saying that if you love your job, you never do a day of work in your life? That's kind of how I feel like I've
We're total hobbyists too for a living.
Yeah. I don't, I mean, I can sit and I can tell you the sort of the sequence of events as to how I got here, but I don't know how I got here.
Right.
And there's no way on God's green earth that I could have imagined a path from where I was 25 years ago to where I am today.
Right.
Would never in a million years have occurred to me. Right. Of course, there are things that I wish I had done differently or would, had done better. But I am just so amazed at where I am right now, and so just unbelievably happy to be doing something that I care so much about, that I feel like it helps so many people. I'm just
we are grateful in the field to have someone like you too. I feel like I know people who literally joined Facebook just to be a part of your page. I'm like, hold on, you have a Facebook page?
I don't know anybody who doesn't know you. But actually, that kind of lends me to my next question. Like we ask all of our guests this, but what would you say has been the most satisfying or fulfilling moment of your MRI career?
Man,
Exclude me meeting Reggie and I.
Yeah, of course, the podcast visitors has been amazing.
Well, I was trying to come up with something else just to keep you guys modest, but now that you've hit on it, there are probably a lot of sort of individual things that I could point to and say, I'm really proud of that accomplishment or this accomplishment. But I think if you try to find kind of the common thread between them, I think it really comes down to, leaving things behind me better than I found them,
Right.
I got involved with the ACR Safety Committee because I was just out of my mind, frustrated that there were no facility safety standards. And then when I did that and I realized that there was a chance to do something similar with FGI and, the design codes, and I did that. And then, getting frustrated with a lack of community and a lack of kind of open access, shared resources for everybody interested in MRI safety and forming the Facebook group. And all of these different kind of steps, each of them is really geared towards leaving things in my wake better than I found them.
Right. I think technologists and patients and just all personnel with healthcare have you to thank as far as like the influence you've had? I mean, you've literally left a wake of improvement.
I hope so. And if that's what's on my tombstone, I'm I will be a happy dead person.
Very cool. Well, I think a lot of times with the Facebook safety group, people only see the technical side of you, but we want them to see the fun side of you.
Yeah, you are
maybe
really fun
just
guy.
for the last few minutes of
Too.
this episode, we do a couple rapid questions. So the rapid, so you got to answer them quickly.
Okay. All right.
Reggie or Robert, go. I'm just kidding.
Reggie.
All right, but we are going to go fast.
Do we come up with
this.
like a couple name for you guys, like Regbert or something like that?
With a new Benlow?
Yeah.
With a J-Lo? What is it?
No, let's not play that. Let's not play that, Jay.
Okay, rapid questions. Here we go.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Texting or talking?
Talking.
Favorite day of the week?
Day of the week. Saturday.
Nice.
Okay. Well, Sundays is when we release the episodes, but
Okay.
okay.
It'll be Sunday that week.
Yeah, thank you. Favorite U.S. city besides the one you live in?
Seattle.
Oh, nice.
Nickname your parents used to call you?
So nickname I got on birth, both my sister and I got birth nicknames was Bird, although that didn't really stick, but
Okay. I like that. Last song you downloaded?
Oh man. Probably
Nelly is hot
Cage
here?
the Elephant. I don't remember a specific song. It was probably an album.
Oh, nice.
Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
Speak every language in the world.
Okay.
I do enough traveling that I always feel like,
I bet.
I can't really click, because I'm in places where I don't really speak the language. That bugs me.
Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving. How can
Mine
you
too.
not love a holiday that's all about eating and
Mine
getting people you love together? So,
How long does it take to get ready?
however much time you're going to give me.
Good question. Okay. Scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you?
I'm not bad, but I'm not Mario Andretti. I'm a
good or
6
bad?
or a 7.
Oh, okay.
Scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver would your wife say you are?
Are negative numbers allowed?
Fill in a scale of negative 10 to 0. Fill in the blank. Taylor Swift is...
Somebody I think maybe I've heard 1 or 2 songs of.
Okay. At what age do you want to retire?
Do I want to what?
At what age do you want to retire?
Do I want to what?
I love the passion.
No, I'm
It's like one
serious.
of those hearing aids jokes. Do you wear hearing aids? What? You got me. Let's see. Invisibility or super strength?
Oh man, invisibility.
Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers?
Oh, that's legit. Yeah?
Scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at keeping secrets?
Oh, I'm good.
Are you?
I'm a 10.
Nice.
Okay.
We're going to talk after this.
Ariel or Jasmine?
Oh man,
Who are those?
Jasmine.
Oh, Disney.
Yeah.
My bad.
Excuse yourself from the
Sorry.
conversation. Apparently you didn't have a sister growing
I'm more
up.
of a
Yeah. Or small children.
Nala.
First celebrity crush. And we'll go around the room. Go ahead.
Oh, J-Lo. Easy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man. See, I'm an old dude, so this
gonna
is
date
probably
you. It's gonna
this
date
is
you a
going
little
way
bit.
back here.
Dave?
Man.
The mother from Spy Kids 1.
What?
Very
Spy
specific.
Kids 1?
I suppose I have to go Farrah Fawcett. So I told you I'm really
Oh,
dating
nice.
myself here.
Okay.
For me, we should pull up each one of these, but it would no longer be rapid. But J.B. Presley would be mine.
Nice.
Dawn or dusk?
Dusk.
I know what you are.
Yeah, I'm dust.
I'm so dawn. So dawn. If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
Oh man. Is
2021?
back the only option?
Yeah.
You start all this MRI safety stuff early?
Yeah. if I got to like go back and give an earlier version of myself some advice, I'd probably just like go back to, like high school and,
It's a good call.
Don't marry that ex-wife.
tell myself, just trust yourself more,
Right.
I think all of us kind of get messages of, well, you're supposed to do it a certain way. And,
That's so true.
I mean, I suppose I've done a fairly good job in my life so far of taking my own advice. And, but I would love to have started earlier than I did.
Favorite junk food?
Oh, the salsa, garden salsa, sun chips. Thank you.
Ooh,
Oh, my
that's a
sister
good
loves
one.
those, actually.
Those are really good.
What's yours, Reggie?
Like
Candy, you
Skittles,
like sweet stuff.
Skittles,
Yeah.
Starburst, that kind of stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Now, see, I'll down a
cream,
pint of
probably
Ben and
mine.
Jerry's.
Oh, nice ice cream.
cream
Yeah,
is
you're my
mine.
guy.
Favorite childhood TV show?
Hogan's Heroes. Again, I'm dating myself, so
Nice.
only the really
You
old
and I were talking
people.
about this the other day. We're diving into it. We talked about Tailspin,
Right.
DuckTales.
My favorite Batman the Animated Series was a good one. I used to watch that almost
He's
all
one
the
of those
time.
superhero nerds.
Yeah. What about you? DuckTales?
Favorite childhood show? I feel like the first thing that's popping off would be Saved by the Bell.
Oh. Dang, yeah. I was thinking cartoon, but yeah.
So was I initially, but there's too many cartoons.
Screech kind of guy?
We're loony, we're toony, we're all little. I don't know. Favorite ice cream flavor, and then we'll stop soon. But
All right, well, since I said Ben and Jerry's,
yeah.
it's either Tonight Dough or New York Super Fudge Chunk. I kind of go back and
cookies
forth.
and cream.
I like to keep it basic. Strawberry.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I would have thought basic would be vanilla, but favorite number.
Favorite number? Excuse me. Is it? Now I'm going to embarrass myself because I don't remember it specifically. With the Lamore frequency, megahertz per Tesla, 42.28
Oh, yeah.
megahertz per Tesla.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
On page 32. That's right.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals? Be honest, Toby.
No, I can say that because I never wear sandals. So.
A man's man.
I'm a tennis
here.
shoe dude,
Hey,
man. You
like that.
Drives
You're
my
a
wife
runner
crazy.
too, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. This is kind of random.
Unlike the rest of them.
I know, right?
What does a person need to be happy?
The desire to be happy.
A hug? Bring it in, Toby.
I was thinking MRSO, but
All right, and last, but certainly not least, is double dipping at a party ever acceptable?
I have to admit that I'm guilty of double dipping. You know, if the dip is better than the chip,
What if it's the garden salsa chips?
well, see,
Then you don't need
then you don't need to, you know. But you know, you get like the store brand, you know, thin potato chips or something like that, and like a good dip, good French onion dip or something like that. I might find myself double dipping, but I'm going to do it when everybody else's heads turn the other way. So.
right. Exactly.
All right. Well, we think we covered it all. Actually, let's do one.
We had a guest question too, right?
Oh, actually, yes. We have several
Sorry.
guest questions.
While he
Thank you.
pulls that up, I wanted you, if you had any advice for someone who kind of wanted to, maybe not traditionally MRI trained, but kind of wanted to follow in your footsteps, someone who might have the passion for MRI, like what would you suggest they kind of do? Like,
Man, soak yourself in it. You know,
Right.
try and figure out
how you
who
can
are
make
the
a
people who share. You know, well, let me qualify that. There are lots of people who are willing to share, you know, their thoughts and opinions, but find somebody who is kind of shaping opinions. Somebody who is coming at this from a personal experience, and they have chosen a direction, and they are kind of pushing it, and they're You will find people in the industry who are willing to kind of help guide you. Look to the literature. Right. Man, a lot of the scientific literature is impenetrable in terms of the way that it's written. Right. So, find folks who can help you translate it into normal human being speak,
Right. Right.
But there's so much information that's out there that just commit yourself to trying to absorb as much of it as you possibly can, and that will mean that you're going to go to lots of different sources. If you find one source that you're getting all your information from, you're going to get one viewpoint, and that's it. So share the love.
Right, nice, thank you.
We got some fan questions, Toby, and actually this first one was thought-provoking for me, so I'm curious your thoughts. But somebody wrote, Mitchell wrote, thank you for submitting your questions, by the way, Mitchell. We pad our patients from the transmit body coil to not have near-field burns. So why on transmit receive coils do we not have to pad around the entire body part in the coil, such as perhaps a knee?
That is a fantastic question. So, and the reason for that is SAR. SAR is awful, horrible, needs to be beaten to death in an alley somewhere.
Robert? Like I need to be the one beaten, or I have to do the beating?
I cough, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
So SAR was developed and implemented in MR for diffuse thermal loading, right? And the question goes to burns. Burns are not diffuse thermal loading, they're focal heating, right? So we're using this tool that was developed for diffuse thermal loading. We're trying to apply it to focal heating. And it's all heating, right? So the same tool should work great for both. Well, no, it doesn't, because one of the reasons is SAR, we say it's averaged across the whole body, right?
Right.
If it's chilly outside and I have a fire going and I stick my hand in the fire, on average, I am perfectly comfortable. 90% of my body is freezing and 10% of my body is burning up.
Right.
If we average those temperatures across my whole body, I'm perfectly comfortable, which we know is not the case, right?
That's a good point.
So SAR as a whole body average number is not going to give us useful information for any one point in the body. So part of it is SAR is the wrong tool for the job to really tell us much of anything about focal burn risk.
I wonder if we could somehow implement the use of surface temperature of the patient, like somehow monitoring the surface temperature, because
I feel like that's the B1 RMS is really starting to play a bigger role when it comes to like the classifications, right, of implants.
So SAR is we're gonna figure out how much energy we're pumping into this patient, right? And then we're gonna divide it across the patient's whole body, even though we're not pumping energy into the patient's whole body. We're just that's the way we're gonna report this number, right? B1 RMS is how much is coming out of the body coil.
Right.
How much energy are we playing with as a sort of as its own measure, not how much averaged across all of your body, how much energy, right?
At least that's consistent data, right?
Right. So if I have a votive candle and I have a bonfire, right, I can choose a small enough unit of space around that votive candle that, my measurement of the energy involved in the votive candle and the bonfire are equal to one another, right? But they're not. Right. Bonfire has a whole lot more energy, right? So if we measure energy output instead of energy output per some volume, some mass or whatever, now all of a sudden we get more reasonable numbers or more actionable numbers. Now that doesn't tell us specifically what the risk of a patient getting a burn is, but it does tell us
the power's too high.
Right. You know, what magnitude of energy do I need to be worried about? You can still get a burn from a votive candle just like you can from a bonfire, but you can get it a whole lot quicker and in a whole lot more, greater number of ways with a bonfire. So part of the problem is just the SAR is the wrong tool to approximate risk. The second thing is that if we're doing a TR knee, right, we can actually pump in at first level mode for short durations of time. We can pump 40 watts per kilogram of energy, RF energy, into the knee. 40 watts per kilogram. Wait a minute. I thought we were capped at 4 watts per kilogram, right? How can we do 10 times that amount of energy?
Right.
Because if we do 4 watts per kilogram and the patient weighs 100 kilograms, we're pumping 400 watts of power into that patient. That's the magnitude, that's the size of the bonfire, right? If we do 40 watts per kilogram into a knee that weighs 3 kilograms, 5 kilograms,
Yeah.
And that's the momentary. You're actually averaging out at 20 watts per kilogram, over more than 6 seconds. So even though it's a higher number per unit mass, it's a much lower total power. The size of the bonfire is much smaller.
Oh, I see
so
what
the
you're saying.
risk of developing patient burns in any TR local coil, because we're depositing energy only into those tissues that we're trying to get signal out of. So we need to use much less total power because we're not sort of spreading it everywhere, and we're just going to try and get,
It's not a buckshot.
L4.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to look at the disc between L4 and L5, right? And you're going to do, body coil transmit. That patient is getting RF from the middle of their thighs up to,
It's almost C-spine, right? Yeah.
yeah. So we're shooting RF all over the place.
Right.
And we're only trying to get signal from this one little spot right here.
Right.
So if we only measured the RF, if we could direct the RF just to that disc that we want, to image, the total RF would be trivial.
Right.
Which is what we're able to do when we use TR, local TR coils. So the size of the bonfire is much, much, much smaller when the volume of tissue inside the coil is much, much smaller, inside the transmit coil.
That's a good illustration.
Yeah, that's awesome. Man,
All right.
Toby, this has been great.
Well, we got more. Next question is from William. How reliable is EP nurse interrogation of pacemakers? Is it common for EP to discover faulty leads and cause a hard stop prior to MRI, and or God help us after MRI?
So I think the question is less about an EP nurse and is more about process.
Right.
So if you have a standardized process for interrogating devices, and you have somebody competent executing that process, I don't care if it's a tech, if it's a tech aide, if it's the EP nurse, if it's the janitor, if you have sort of a flow, we're going to do this. If the result of that is A, then we do this. If the result of that is B, then we do this other thing. And as long as the person who is running through that series of steps is trained and competent and knows how to use the device or whatever, then I'm less concerned with whether it's an EP nurse or an MR tech or a tech aide or the EP.
You don't care about the
themselves.
credentials. You care about the flow chart, I guess.
Yeah.
The process.
Yeah.
I mean, with the understanding that whoever's doing that has, sort of the minimum level of competence necessary to do the task and do it well.
Right. And I'm sure they wouldn't be EP nurse if they did.
We kind of talked about this a few times, but this next question is from Susan. So thank you, Susan. I know that ACR recommends to have 2 staff members at all times in the department. Do you believe this will ever be mandated?
I
Anonymous reporting.
I would love to see it happen. I mean, I know that the accreditation organizations they've been slow to embrace and adopt.
Is any other country
seems like
doing
the
it?
logistics of implementing a
Not really.
regulation like that would be
Right. Yeah, it's tough. That is tough.
Good
I feel like
questions,
some
though.
people, more. I can understand where more places would need it than others. I mean, the flow changes dynamically, but it's always great to have that backup when you need it. It's when you don't have it and you need it is when you're just like
Right.
right. And it's too late by then.
Allison has the next question. So thank you, Allison. Recommendations for focusing your studying for the boards.
For the ABMRS boards, the suggestions that I typically give are absolutely you want to know ACR MRI Safety Manual. These are all the resources that I'm identifying are free, and either you already have them or you can get them easily. So ACR MR Safety Manual. I would also take a look at the gadolinium sections of the ACR's contrast manual. The contrast manual covers all contrast, so 85-90% of it you can throw away for the purpose of the ABMRS boards. I would take a close look at every MR system operator's manual has a safety chapter, and look through that really carefully. Find a friend or a colleague who works on a system from a different manufacturer. If you're a Siemens shop, find a GE friend or a Philips friend or a Canon friend and trade safety chapters. And then read them side by side, because you will most likely be surprised to identify how differently different manufacturers talk about the exact same thing. And it's really important for both the MRSO role and for the exam itself to understand, DBDT is time varying gradients, is, imaging gradients, is, and just from a vocabulary standpoint and an application standpoint, understanding when somebody says this, what they're really talking about, or the way that I was originally taught it, is they're referring to this other thing. And having that cross-vendor language vocabulary is really important.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
Well, other than the Facebook page, do you have any other, sources of access or anything else you want to kind of shout out that people can kind of reach you on or get more education on? Where do you start, right?
Yeah. I mean, people are always welcome to reach out to me individually, and I'll be happy to point them in whatever direction I can. Awesome. The Facebook page, the MRI Safety Group Facebook page, is a great peer resource.
Right.
And people are always sharing, papers and articles and, their own policies and their own experiences. And it's a great place to go and be a sponge.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you for the influence you've had in the MRI world.
Yeah, keep
specifically
it going.
with safety. You've left a wake of improvement.
Don't retire.
And you don't what?
And you should genuinely be proud of that. So, and sincerely thank you for that.
For sure.
Did you have anything else you want to cover, Reggie?
I don't want to go, man. I'm not ready. Yeah, I'm sure we can figure out something. No.
He has commitment issues. Well, I guess this is when we say our goodbyes. So thank you again for watching Zone 3 Podcast.
Yes.
Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for telling your friends about us. And it's been an honor to be joined today by Toby. So thank you, Toby.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
And real quick before we go, I just want to say that, remember, if you want one of these notebooks, we are only giving away 2. So make sure you leave a comment, let us know, just reach out to us about safety in the comments and how you feel about everything. And
show them the inside of that real quick. I think it's helpful. It's got a little cheat sheet for those new techs.
Yeah, I'll put a link down in the description.
And some of you old vet techs too.
But really big shout out to all the support that Aegis has given us too.
We appreciate your engagement. We appreciate everything that you guys do.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you, Toby. So thank you. And thank you again.
guys.
Zone 3 Podcast. We're out. Bye, everybody.